Hey listeners, I want to tell you about the 34th PASA Sustainable Agriculture Conference happening February 5th through 7th in Lancaster, PA. You can register at pasafarming.org/HRN. That's PASA farming.org/HRN. This conference draws a diverse group of rural and urban farmers, educators, advocates, entrepreneurs, community groups, artisans, researchers, policymakers, home cooks and gardeners, youth, and others for 3 days of learning on sustainable agriculture and food systems topics. I went last year and I had a blast and I learned so much. So don't miss more than 80 educational sessions and an expansive trade show. Again, you can learn more and register at pasafarming.org/HRN.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
HRN is food radio supported by you. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org. Hi, listeners. I wanted to take a moment to talk about Heritage Radio Network, the organization that produces this podcast. HRN is the only podcast network dedicated to food, beverages, and the culinary world. It's also a nonprofit that educates emerging food storytellers. HRN brings listeners free podcasts on everything from the artistry of baking to the craft of brewing, the complexities of cheesemongering to the challenges of solving climate change. And they need your help. Help HRN thrive by going to heritageradionetwork.org/donate and making a donation to keep food radio free and accessible.
This episode is brought to you by Wisconsin Cheese. We've been making cheese in Wisconsin since before we were even a state, which may be one reason why we win so many awards for it. It's what happens when a whole state dreams in cheese. Find your next favorite cheese at wisconsincheese.com.
This is Capri Cafaro, host of Eat Your Heartland Out. This week we are embracing the culture of fairs and festivals across the Midwest. Meet Haley Robinson, executive producer and host of the TV series Finding Festivals. Then we reach back into the show archives for interviews with two guests who share their expert knowledge about the subject. That's all coming up on Eat Your Heartland Out. Haley, welcome to Eat Your Heartland Out. So exciting to have a fellow Buckeye on the show.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here.
So we had an opportunity to meet this past fall at the American Public Television Fall Marketplace because not only we have another thing in common outside of both being from Ohio, we both have television series on public television. So tell me a little bit about where you got the idea, what inspired you to create this show.
Yes. So the series that I independently produced, Finding Festivals, really came to me when I was 17 years old, serving my hometown as a festival queen. And one of the duties is going around the state and really acting as an ambassador and networking within the other festival circuit through the OFEA associated events.
And what is the OFEA for folks that don't know?
Yes, the OFEA is the Ohio Festivals and Events Association. And this is something that festivals around Ohio have to abide by so many criteria in order to be part of that. And that doesn't even include the festivals outside of that association. So just in that association, there's probably about 100 festivals. And there's other festivals outside of that, like the Dublin Irish Festival, Jeep Fest, that are not part of that association at this time. That's one thing that was really fun being a festival queen, is going to all of these towns that I would have never otherwise visited because of the OFEA and representing my hometown.
That is awesome. That is that. I mean, I know, one of the things that also kind of inspired me to do not only this show, actually, Eat Your Heartland Out, but also, the TV show, America the Bountiful, was the fact that there are so many fairs and festivals in Ohio. And it's not just necessarily about the county fairs, but it is those, individual community type level events that, might be, sort of agriculturally based. I'm thinking Geneva Grape Jamboree, or, Pumpkin Festival, Huntsburg Pumpkin Festival in my neck of the woods, for example, but then a lot of ethnic festivals as well, Greek festivals, Italian festivals, that sort of thing. And it's such an incredible thing to share with others because it is something that brings communities together. So how do you, there are a lot of festivals in Ohio, but I know you cover both Ohio and Michigan. How do you tackle that? Like, how did you put this show together, and structure it?
Yeah, I think it all starts with just having an eye for it. And I think that's just true in any kind of travel style. If you naturally are a road tripper or naturally an RVer or naturally a luxe traveler, you're already going to gravitate to that information. And plus, you've probably trained your algorithm to show you those places. That kind of helped me. So I knew what I was looking for. With this particular season, I knew the budget was going to limit my footprint. So yes, I do stay in Ohio, Michigan, and we do one episode in Indiana. I am hoping to be able to expand that for future seasons. But I really wanted to showcase the cultural diversity of these festivals through the neighborhoods in the Midwest, because I felt that we are such a great melting pot to the point that people don't realize that we're very ethnically diverse. And I wanted to focus on that. And of course, I also wanted to introduce what festivals are, because to your point, there are fairs and festivals, and many don't understand that there is a big difference between the two, where fairs really focus on, the 4-H programs and the agriculture and the local livestock. Festivals really focus on the beloved traditions of their community. And yes, some of those are the harvesting seasons, like the Geneva Grape Jamboree, the Circleville Pumpkin Show. But then there are ones like the Dublin Irish Festival, or even like the Toledo Jeep Fest, that have nothing to do with harvesting, but they're such a big piece of who the people are. And that's what I wanted to show, is not only the cultural diversity, but really educate the public of, this is what you can learn at your local festival. It's not just a fun weekend where you can get an elephant ear, but it's really a place that you can learn about your history.
I love that. And I couldn't agree more. It's, they are such a unique opportunity to bring community together, but to educate one another about, different cultural traditions and practices and what makes those individual communities. Like you said, like Toledo Jeep Fest, it's like, Jeep is so synonymous for Toledo, for those that know Toledo, right? So, it's something that it is not food related or quote unquote culture related, like an ethnic festival, but it is an intrinsic part of that community and that culture. And I think that is amazing that you capture that. So what's your episode structure? I mean, do you cover one festival at a time, or a couple in a different in a specific area of the state? How do you put that together?
Yeah. So, my original vision was to try to pair like 2 festivals at a time, because there's over 100 in Ohio. I was like, I got to show them all in one season, but that was not feasible. What I found is really structuring it more like a travel show first. So I look for not only the interesting part of a festival. So is there something educational about it? Is there something unique about it that I can really build off of? But what's the destination like? And kind of build out from there. So really our story is, we start at the festival. I think a great example of this structurally is our Traverse City Cherry Festival.
Yes, I was just there last summer.
Yes. And I'm sure we have completely different angles as far as like how we experienced it too, which is really fun about it. Because we kind of approached it from a travel standpoint of like, okay, we have this festival, and, they're known for cherries, but what does the community look like around it? And we went to a local pie shop and learned from that couple. We went to off campus to an actual orchard and learned about that side. But then we also went to a winery and learned about how they incorporate the cherries. So we start with the festival, but learn how that bleeds into the community outside of the festival and how it all kind of plays out. And another great example, that's really how the show is structured, is we kind of start with the festival and try to figure out how it networks within the community. Because even though the festival is just this week or this weekend for that particular community for public to come in, this is something they work on all year round.
Absolutely.
This is their bread and butter. This is their big economic boom in the travel industry. So we want to kind of focus on, what does this do for the travel scene? And especially this season, I want to point out too, that we went into it knowing that festivals were coming back wholly for the first time. So we started filming June 2022. And I kind of, it was kind of a living on a prayer decision. Like I only had a very small sponsorship to start with, and I had to make decisions within 6 weeks of whether or not I was going to jump on this or not. And, but I really wanted to tell the story of festivals coming back from COVID because I thought that was such an interesting story to capture.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, as we all know, I mean, that sense of community was, obviously gone. I mean, it was lacking because of the COVID restrictions and all of that. And, and as a result, I'm sure you probably saw this, in each festival that you went to, particularly at that period of time when you first started filming, that I'm sure the economic impact wasn't there, for whatever the 2 years that they were not having those festivals. And so I'm sure that bringing them back not only reignited that sense of community and purpose and, but also that tourism that comes in and the dollars that come with it. So you have one season, or how many seasons do you have?
One season for now, and we're working to try to keep telling these stories because I think they're important. And I think there's a value in preserving community tradition.
Oh, 100%. How many episodes in your first season?
Yeah. So season 1, we did 13 episodes, but we did cover 14 festivals. So we were a little tricky there. We do have one episode that's a 2-parter.
I see. So can you give us a rundown? What are the 14 that you went to? Do you know them off the top of your head?
I can always figure out like 10 and then I'm like, wait, what are the other ones? So here I go. Let's see if I can do it. So we did the Toledo Jeep Festival, the Saginaw Chippewa Annual Powwow, the Dublin Irish Festival, Festival of Sail, which is in Sandusky biannually, the Pirate Festival at Put-in-Bay, the Circleville Pumpkin Show, the Geneva Grape Jamboree, Tulip Time, the Lilac Festival at Mackinac Island, the Bavarian Festival in Frankenmuth, the Three Rivers Festival in Fort Wayne. And this is always where I get stuck.
Hey,
I'm like, wait, what else did I do? Oh, and Momentum, which is an art festival here in Toledo. And that episode, I was going to actually do Art Prize, which is by Grand Rapids, but I found out that the year of 2022 was recognized as the International Year of Glass. And I thought, well, what better way to explore glass history in the Glass City during an art festival than this year? So I learned so much about glass that I had no idea. And I'm like, wow, it was a fun episode to put together because there was something that one of the interviewees said, is they said that, we take glass for granted because we see through it. It's designed to be seen through, but we take it for granted. And I was like, oh, that's such a good point. So, it was one of those things that even as an artist going into this, as a documentarian almost, is, it's my job to really create a space where you can see through what I'm doing so you can capture what we're actually trying to present to you. So I really felt like a piece of glass at that moment. I'm like, ooh, yeah.
I love that. That's such an interesting metaphor, because you're at least this is how I see my role too, particularly doing America the Bountiful, is, you're a conduit to showcase other people's stories,
Mm-hmm.
and provide the audience with, access to a story, to a place, and to people that they may have not necessarily had a chance to go to meet, or to learn about, outside of your show. And it's that gateway. You rattled off a ton of festivals.
Yes. And I still missed like 3.
All very different though. And I wanted you to kind of go down the laundry list just to give listeners an opportunity to, kind of get a window into the diversity of the type of festivals that are out there just in Ohio and Michigan. I know the one in Indiana, but different types, different objectives, really just a interesting cross-section of the type of things that are out there. I know it's hard to choose, but I mean, what, are there any particular festivals or festival events? Like one thing that came to mind when you mentioned Traverse City is, the pit spitting contest, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering that stood out to me, as, kind of a novel, right? Are there any kind of events or food or things that like really stuck with you, at any of the festivals that you featured on the show?
I think at every festival there was something I kind of took home with me. That's really the fun part, is just understanding the people through their traditions. Probably the two that really stick out for me, and they're completely polar opposite from each other. The first is the Geneva Grape Jamboree, where I had to stomp grapes on stage with like 50
Yep.
people watching me, and I
Yep.
was mic'd up and a cameraman, and the juices were flying out of the bucket, and I was like, okay, this is an experience. And this is something they do every year. And also the grape ice cream.
That's my neck of the woods. That's my part of Ohio. So,
Yes. And the grape ice cream, like, it is an
oh,
experience. Whether you like grape or not, I think everyone should try it, because I don't know how to describe it without someone actually participating in the tradition of trying the grape ice cream.
I agree. Well, the way that I describe it, because it is a different type of flavor, is it tastes like purple. I don't know what that means.
Yes, it
But it
does.
tastes like purple, and it's kind of like if you have like. I mean, it doesn't taste anything like this, but when you think about blue raspberry, and it's like blue raspberry doesn't really taste like raspberry; it tastes like blue. Like, so yes, this is why. But that's the thing: you're giving people a window in, and somebody from Toledo, or wherever that they're watching the show, they might decide to get in the car and some September go and check out the Geneva Grape Jamboree. Taste that great
Absolutely.
ice cream.
It's worth it. And they have, like, you can taste wines on campus too. Like, you can go to the festival and they have a whole room dedicated to trying the local wines. And I was like, I don't
Yep.
even have to leave the festival. I mean, I did. I went to Ferrante's, but
Oh yes.
it was neat to be able to taste the region at one place. And I really liked that.
I like Taste the Region. So that was one. You said they're polar opposites. What was another one?
Yes, the other one is actually the Cleveland Tyagaraja, which is the largest Indian classic music festival outside of the country, India. And the
Oh,
day that we
wow.
were there, they had over like the entire, not only attendance, but the performers. They all perform the five gems of Tyagaraja, which is one of their biggest composers in India. I think like over 1,000 years old. His music has been part of their culture. And they had over, I think, 500 performers performing the five gems of Tyagaraja, plus everyone who attended there. Like, I think a quarter of the Cleveland University gymnasium was blocked off, but every seat was filled. It was beautiful. It was just a room full of people enjoying their culture and sharing their culture with us. And it was just so impactful. And it was really a moment for me that made me realize, like, I have to do everything in my power to make this show national, because these people's story deserves to be told and seen.
Yeah, that is incredible, and that shows the impact of and the reach of what you're trying to do, and again how festivals can really capture a sense of place and a sense of culture, and present it to a much wider audience, within that region. So, I know you said that you have one season for now. You want to do more. If you were to choose the 13 next, like, do you have any top picks that you are, hoping that you might be able to see?
Yes, I have some in the think bucket, is what I call it.
I love that.
One in particular I have had my eye on for pretty much since I wrapped season 1. I was like, when we do season 2, we have to cover this. So there is a Festival of Horse in Georgetown, Kentucky. They are known for as a horse county. And when I talked to the tourism board, I unpacked what that looked like. I asked, is that because of the Derby? Why are you called Horse County? And she said that it's because they had the best working horses for over a century. People knew to get their horses from there. Yes, they had some Derby horses that were successful, but really they were known for the working horse, and people knew where to get their horse as far as the breeding goes. And in addition to that, she also told me that they are a birthplace of bourbon. Now, I recognize many places claim that in Kentucky, but she did tell me that they are the only ones with a plaque, to which I responded, I'm not going to argue with the plaque. So But I thought it'd be such a fun way to explore not only that town and that region, but also like understand, Kentucky. We know Kentucky for the Derby. We know them for bourbon. What does that look like in a town known for raising horses? And that's what I want to explore and understand. Another one I have under my cap is, I just learned about this and I thought we have to go, is the Edgar Allan Poe Festival in Baltimore. First and foremost, I've been dying to go to Baltimore. So, and Edgar Allan Poe is probably one of my favorite literary artists. Like I have a big leather bound book of like all of his works, his poems and his short stories. And I think a lot of people may feel that way because they were introduced to him in high school. But regardless, I am a fan of his works and I would love to celebrate with these people. And they have a lot of the events are free, but they have some ticketed events. So not only do you learn about Baltimore's history during the time of his death, you learn about his works. And they have like a masquerade ball and other events that are themed to his stories. So it'd just be such a fun, immersive, bookish event. And that's a space that I personally have been exploring are bookish events and the community around that. So I'd love to introduce that through a literary artist that most people are aware of, which is Edgar Allan Poe.
That is fantastic. I absolutely love it. I do want to touch on, because this is such a labor of love for you. I want the audience to know what kind of work goes into putting on a show like this. So, and you wear like all of the hats. So tell us.
Yeah. So I will say I've had a few friends who are in film and you will ask like, oh, how did you get into this? And I openly say, if you enjoy your weekends and you enjoy your time with your loved ones, don't do this. To your point, it is a labor of love. So not only am I responsible for the fundraising, so I, work with potential sponsors and underwriters to get them on board with the show and them donate to the show to make it happen. I, find the talent to be part of the production crew. And on set, not only do I host, but I kind of double as a PA. And I know we kind of share that task too, because we're trying to help our film crew be as successful as possible. And it's easier to just do it yourself kind of thing. But even in post-production, I edit all of the show. I pick out all of the music. I manage most of the transitions and the storytelling, the writing behind it. I do get some help with the polishing efforts. So, formatting it for Nita and getting the captions on there and even some motion graphics, because what people don't realize is even though someone says they can edit video, compositing video clips into a program and understanding how to effectively storytell through that medium is a very different skill set than being able to put a bunch of like fun, flashy graphics together. Because what would take me to put together like 5-8 minutes of content would take the same amount of time to make one like 10-second flashy graphic for a motion graphic artist. Yeah. Like it's a completely different skill set. So I do get help with that because at the same time of me doing this project, I was working a full-time agency job from 9 to 5 every single day. So I would go in, do my work for my agency job, come home, cook dinner for my husband, play with my dog because I need some outside time. And then from 7 p.m. until 1 a.m. in the morning, I'm editing the show or writing emails to get funders or managing decisions when it comes to final edits. So it was 18 months of pure labor, and it was, if you don't love it, it will be miserable for any person who doesn't enjoy it, which luckily I do. I'm very blessed to have been able to do that, but it was a lot. There was a lot of sacrifice involved, not just from me, but from everyone around me.
Absolutely. I think that's important for folks to understand what goes into it. This is wonderful. I mean, we are definitely going to keep an eye out on, what you put out next. But, in the meantime, where can our listeners try to find your show, Finding Festivals?
Yes, so it is available for free on pbs.org. If you just search in the little search box, Finding Festivals, it will pop up. This is something that was very important to me because most of these festivals are free. And I didn't feel right being a gatekeeper. So you can go on PBS and watch it from there. We also have a website, findingfestivals.com, where you can get articles that detail a little bit more behind the scenes of what you see in the episode. And you can follow me on social media. I do go by Hayley Story, which is spelled Haylie Story. And that is on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. And we do have a Facebook group for Finding Festivals.
Oh, how good. That's great.
Yeah, and we do curate a list, a small list, because there's so many lists that have like over 100 festivals, and there's a lot of information. We curate a list so it's a little more manageable to digest, and we just showcase events that are happening that particular weekend. We post that every Wednesday on the group and then Thursday on my Instagram. And that way people can kind of see what's happening that weekend. We also discuss some behind the scenes of finding festivals. We answer questions. So yeah, it's been a really fun, vibrant group of people. It's been growing. We started this, I think, maybe last July, kind of on a whim, and we've been keeping it up. We have over 300 members. So we would love for more people to join and just talk about the thing that we love most, which is community traditions.
That is wonderful. Well, like I said, I'm going to keep an eye out, and I know our listeners are going to be so interested to check out all the different festivals across, the footprint in the Midwest on your show. So, and learning along the way. Thank you so much, Haley, for joining us, and we're going to keep looking for your great content.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure, and as always, it's so fun to chat with you.
Absolutely. Same to you. Take care. This is Eat Your Heartland Out with me, Capri Cafaro. After the break, I'll be back with a special segment from the archives with two guests that share insights about the time-honored traditions of fairs and festivals across the region.
This episode is brought to you by Wisconsin Cheese. There's a reason when you think of Wisconsin, you think cheese. Cheese is a huge part of Wisconsin's history and future. In Wisconsin, the state of cheese, the tradition of cheese-making excellence began 180 years ago, before Wisconsin was recognized as a state. Immigrants traveled to settle in this lush green hills of Wisconsin, bringing their cheese-making traditions with them. These storied skills, combined with the freshest milk available, created a cheese-making culture that is uniquely Wisconsin. Wisconsin's 1,200 cheesemakers, many of whom are third and fourth generation, continue to pass on old world traditions while adopting modern innovations in cheese-making craftsmanship. Find your next favorite cheese at wisconsincheese.com.
Welcome back to Eat Your Heartland Out. I'm your host, Capri Cafaro. Before the break, I was speaking with Haley Robinson, host of the TV series Finding Festivals on PBS, about her passion for capturing festival culture in communities across the Midwest. Since we're talking about festivals today, I wanted to reach back into the Eat Your Heartland Out archives to an episode from 2021 that also focused on the importance of fairs and festivals in the Midwest and beyond. First up is my interview with Maria Calico, President and CEO of the International Association of Fairs and Expositions, who discussed the history behind the agricultural fair and how fairs have both changed and stayed the same over the years. Take a listen to part of my interview with Marla. Marla, thank you so much for joining the program. And please introduce our listeners to your organization, the International Association of Fairs and Expositions. What do you do?
Hey, thanks, Capri. It's a pleasure to be with you today. The International Association of Fairs and Expositions, or commonly known as IAFE, we are a global organization which represents the interest and the betterment of agricultural fairs and expos all over the world. And to translate that to your listeners, that would be what we know dearly in the heartland as county fairs and state fairs.
Well, and so I can't think of anyone better to talk to us about the history of the agricultural fair, particularly in the context of the United States and in the heartland. But I know that its roots aren't just here on the continental United States or North America, right? It goes all the way back to the other side of the Atlantic.
Absolutely, it does. Agricultural expositions in England in the 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries were primarily—
That's a lot of centuries.
A lot of centuries were primarily gatherings of the landed gentry to explore and share ideas with one another. They gave awards for best seeds and best animals. I have a print from the Smithfield show in my office that shows it's a color polarized print from the 1800s of champion Hereford bull and some sheep. And so these were quite well established throughout England, and that English model came to the United States and the North American continent. There were two organizations in the United States, one in Canada, that were chartered by the king to operate some type of a agricultural exposition. But the county fair and state fair as we know it today, organized in the United States, really came about in 1811. A gentleman by the name of Elkanah Watson saw the need for wool for the coming War of 1812 so that soldiers' uniforms could be made and manufactured in the United States. And so he imported merino wool, merino sheep, and he decided to show those sheep off to his neighbor because he wanted to get them interested in raising as well. And he organized the Berkshire Agricultural Society in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. And in 1812, 1813, they began to have an annual gathering in the fall, celebration of the harvest. And it quickly went from bringing your best animals and people talking and swapping ideas and swapping genetics, so it were, to include what we now call the domestic arts, the knitting, the weaving, creating of food products. And, at that very first fair, of course, they had food stands, and they actually had a type of ride. And from that time forward, you can watch the expansion of the agricultural fair, the county fair model, which was represented by common citizens, having an elected board of directors. It just grew westward across the country as our country grew.
Right. And would you say that one of the reasons why the fairs grew to the West, obviously as our population moved west, but because of the presence and the prevalence of agriculture as kind of as the origin, the heart of, so many of the places in the Midwest, the Connecticut Western Reserve and beyond?
Oh, absolutely. We were for many, many years, decades upon decades, an agrarian society. And so to do so, to be successful in agriculture, you're always looking for better ways to do things, better ways to improve the genetics of your animals, more efficient ways, the use of new equipment. And so hand in hand with doing that, basically to survive, farmers needed to get together and to compare notes. And truly a county fair, a state fair is exactly that, even today.
Right. So I would be curious as well, how many of these agricultural fairs exist in the United States and worldwide? I mean, I can just tell you from my backyard in Ohio, I mean, we have county fairs in all 88 counties, and obviously a very large state fair in Ohio. And we are very, I think, similar to many of our neighbors. So there has to be hundreds, if not thousands, of these agricultural fairs.
Yes, certainly. Well, our organization, we are a voluntary membership organization. We represent right now about 1,100 fairs worldwide, with members coming from primarily the United States, Canada, followed then by Australia and the United Kingdom. But globally, there would be well over 2,000. There are probably 1,900 in the United States alone. We simply don't represent every agricultural fair out there because many are just simply tiny events that really are doing their thing, may not necessarily need our services. Similarly, in Canada, there's a lot of particularly in the eastern part, in Ontario and Quebec. So globally, I would have no doubt that we could say there are probably 3,000 or more agricultural fairs operating today.
Thanks for listening to Eat Your Heartland Out. It's time for another break, but don't go far. I'll be back with more from the Eat Your Heartland Out archives. Welcome back to Eat Your Heartland Out. This is Capri Cafaro. Thanks for sticking around to hear more of my conversation with Catherine Lambrecht, president of the Greater Midwest Foodways Alliance. If you want to hear the complete episode with Marla and Catherine from 2021, please visit heritageradionetwork.org or find Eat Your Heartland Out wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Catherine, thanks for joining Eat Your Heartland Out. We're happy to have you.
I'm thrilled to be here.
I can't think of anybody better to join this show about the intersection of food and culture in the Midwest than obviously the president of the Greater Midwest Foodways Alliance. But you are a special guest for this episode because we are talking about fairs and county fairs and state fairs. And the Greater Midwest Foodways Alliance has a very special program that they've been doing at state fairs. Tell us about it.
Since 2009, we've been conducting the Family Heirloom Recipe Contest at various state fairs, basically collecting recipes, their stories, also the images. Often they come in very nice displays, so we capture that as well. And then we put it on our website, and then from time to time they end up in book form.
Oh, wow. So how many states have you done?
Let's tell you what states we haven't done.
Okay, that may be easier.
We haven't done it. It is. It's Nebraska, North Dakota, and Michigan.
Okay. Why? Why those three states are not on the list?
Okay, North Dakota, never believed me that we wanted to come and do it. Honest to God. Michigan, when we started this program, their state fair had gone bankrupt, and it had been going on since like 1840-something. So something, or the state pulled its funding, I don't know the story, but it disappeared. It is back in a much smaller form, supported by Fifth Third Bank. And then in Nebraska, they never respond, and I've been told that's not unusual.
Oh, well, hopefully these three states at some point will get on board, because this sounds like such an interesting project that the organization puts on, and really brings people out to both share and preserve their own family recipes. So what's the criteria when somebody enters?
The recipe, would like it to be in their family 50 years or more. They have to write a history story of how that recipe has worked its way through the family. What occasions it might have been served, who brought it to the family. We also wanted a prepared dish. And then what I call kind of the beauty contest, and that's not to sound snide, but it's like people show up with antique serving pieces. They show up with the stained and handwritten recipe from their relative, and it's often pictures. Sometimes it's just things that around their lives and around food. Was it that sour cherry tree? There might be a picture of that. Or did they raise chickens and there's pictures of children playing with the chickens? Things like that.
So it really, the recipe is a conduit to tell a story then.
It is. And also, the recipes that I like to see are the ones that have never been documented, where the family just takes it out, almost takes it for granted. It's a family favorite, usually made by one person in the family, and then they go to heaven, and there's no trace of how to make it. And those recipes, especially if they document it now, finally, you know what? If they never bring it to our contest, we've accomplished our goal.
I love that. Do you have any good examples of that in your travel since 2009 doing this?
Of that type? Well, we had one which was called It Must Be Monday. And it was basically she took like cornmeal batter and folded in all the leftovers from the weekend into this one baked item. And it
kind of like a pot pie or a casserole?
I would say more in the casserole direction, but when they started the story, it began with "It must be Monday."
That's so funny.
Like it's dreaded and it's loved at the same time.
Oh, that's great. Did that recipe of just a bunch of leftovers and a casserole dish win?
I believe so. It's been, this is the problem.
A while.
I mix the stories. I love the stories. And sometimes I don't remember who won. I just remember all of them are winners. Unfortunately, we do have to select who does win. But, that's my challenge.
Sure. Well, I mean, I get that. And I can only imagine being in your shoes how difficult that would be because, really, I mean, every story is unique and every story, and every recipe, because they are heirloom recipes from people's families that have been passed down, generation after generation, that is, how do you judge one, being better than the other, so to speak? But it does sound like it's about capturing that story.
Capturing that story. And in fact, one of our judges was confronted at the Indiana State Fair, and she goes, "It's always about the story. It's always about the story." And he said, it is 50% of the points. However, another one of our regular judges, Jolene Katzenberger at the Indiana State Fair, she once held out a cake, and she says, this is very likely the cake that everybody wants when you go and have a pitch-in or a potluck. Mm-hmm. She said, this is the cake. And she goes, the problem is we have 16 of all these wonderful items that are favorites. And, we have to pick one, which means even a very good recipe is still maybe going home without winning.
Sure. I mean, and it's about that context, too. I love that you brought up the, sort of the antique china or the pictures and those sort of things. I'm just, envisioning this in my head. Unfortunately, I've never seen this in action at the Ohio State Fair, which I feel bad about because I definitely want to see this in action, and kind of am motivated to do one of my own maybe one of these days, since we certainly do have
because at the Ohio State Fair, last year was COVID,
right,
and this year it's also COVID. They're doing a very bare bones version, and I don't blame them because there's a lot of money invested in these fairs, and if you suddenly have, like we have at the moment, people stop coming or reduce the crowd, there's money lost.
Right. And I mean, all these fairs, these state fairs, they are annual events. They are huge moneymakers. They're big tourist attractions, and COVID obviously has had a big impact on them. But, you also mentioned, I remember in one of our conversations about how you can tell sometimes at these state fairs, how the farmers are faring in the economy.
Absolutely. Now, when it comes to state fairs like at Minneapolis and Indianapolis, you don't have any sense. But when you have one that draws more rural participants, like say Springfield, Illinois, Sedalia, Missouri, the Iowa State Fair, even though it's in a metropolitan area for that state, you can tell there's a decline in participation. And I talked to Arlette, who she's now gone to heaven, but she was the superintendent at the Iowa State Fair. And she goes, Kathy, here's the deal. She goes, participating in the state fair is a luxury. She says there's cost of participation, there's cost of food, there's cost in being here. And she goes, when you have a tight year and the crop is not doing well or didn't do well the year before, she goes, this is an easy thing to cut out. So we do see participation dip when there are economic issues. So I'm interested to see, I'm leaving next week for Illinois, Indiana, and Missouri, 3 days and a fair each day. And I'm very curious what's going to happen.
Well, I'm jealous. I mean, that sounds like one heck of a fun job to do, to travel around to those fairs. And speaking of, let me kind of back up and put, this work with the state fairs and the heirloom recipes in the context of the Midwest Foodways organization. Mm-hmm. I think that take a minute actually to introduce the listeners to the Greater Midwest Foodways Alliance and what you do and how this particular project fits into your mission.
Okay, well, it was founded to celebrate and document the food and culture of the Midwest, which is really quite varied. Like there's some regions where you could just throw a blanket and say, well, that's French or that's Creole. The Midwest, it's like every farm, every piece of land has its own culture, and it's actually quite dynamic.
Oh yeah, well that's what this show is all about for that exact reason.
Absolutely.
So as part of what you do with the Midwest Foodways Alliance, not only kind of try to capture the diversity but preserve the history. So it's just trying to put this particular project in context to the work that the Foodways Alliance does.
Okay, so in this case, for years we documented this, on our website. But websites are ephemeral. You don't pay the bill the for the web hosting, things disappear.
Right.
And about 2 years ago was the Illinois bicentennial, and for years we had been talking about maybe doing a book, and there were several, let's say, challenges that were suggested. And one was, if the story's not good enough, we'll interview the people and rewrite them. Pictures, we needed to have studio pictures, and we need to test all the recipes. And it occurred to me, the pictures that I take at the state fair, you can't replicate.
Yeah.
They're unique on their own.
I agree with that. I mean, I know what you're saying, because there's so much character that goes into these fairs
Yes.
that you can't replicate it. You have to catch that moment.
And I hate to say it, but looking at a book from Nigella Lawson also was helpful, because there was one book where I just looked at every picture and it looked like she made it herself, took a picture. The icing wasn't even. There were crumbs on the plate. I was like, darn it, that's what I'm looking at too sometimes. So it gave me some encouragement. I pretty much, except for typos and things, left the stories as stated, because that themselves is a record. And as for testing them, well, we've all dealt with recipes that are untested. And somebody commented, he goes, this is really like a community cookbook. Well, to some extent it is.
Right.
But it's also the information, the documents and everything is going to go to the University of Michigan archives. They have one that's specific for culinary collections. And I've already arranged it that all these things will go to the archive. So they won't be lost, because that's the whole thing. It's like, what's lost? It's lost once it's forgotten.
Right.
Or in a recipe, forgotten, or you never learned how to make it. And I went through that. My grandmother died when I was 15, and there were key dishes I loved but never learned how to make. And she was one of those people where everything was spit-spot. She just pulled things out of the fridge, pulled things out of the oven. Lunch was served. You didn't see the working elements.
Yeah.
And it took 2 years to figure out the working elements and replicate those. And then once I did,
A little
I shared it
reverse
with my
engineering.
family. Oh my God. And very painful too. Especially when she could have just told me and I never had asked.
Yeah, we don't realize how important those things are. I have all of my grandmother's old cookbooks and a number of her, handwritten recipes that from all over the place. Things. I mean, the real, hardcore passed down Italian recipes, there's no recipe for it. But, a lot of the stuff from the 50s and 60s and even the 70s, which she may have seen on a TV show or in a magazine, and she recopied it down. And I have all these legal papers and notepads, and they're all in my grandmother's handwriting with dates in the corner. It's just incredible, because it is this archive of your own family history, but also a snapshot in time of, that culture. As we know, I mean, there are things that are well extinct, the weird Jell-O salads and Jell-O molds and things that people look at now, and there's Facebook pages about that, but sometimes these things get carried on because they have a piece of nostalgia. And the fact that you are able to, have it in a participatory, this historic participation, I think is great. So, people are coming out, they are sharing their stuff. But then ultimately, as you just said, it's going to be archived at the University of Michigan.
It's going to be archived. And like I said, it's also in a book form. And I look at it this way. It isn't so much that we're making money, because we're not. It is really another way of protecting those materials, because in all these different forms, the one that's the least secure is what we have on our website.
Right.
Because that's the one that disappears. Put it in a book. If there's only 10 of these books sold and somebody still has that collectible, at least it's there.
Well, where can our listeners get this book if they wanted to? Because if I heard this show, I'd be like, where can I want to see this, and I want to see if I can make some of these recipes and read these stories.
Well, they can buy it directly from us. They can buy it from Amazon. They can ask for it via their library. I don't know how many are out there in libraries, but you know what? If you ask, and you ask enough times, it will happen.
That's true. So what's it called, and what's your website?
It is, so the book is Family Heirloom Recipes from the Illinois State Fair, and there will probably be a Missouri version because coming up later this year because it's their bicentennial.
Oh, wow.
And then our website is greatermidwestfoodways.com, and it's greater, I don't know if you have to explain it, it's not a good, but it is an homage to the Great Lakes and the Great Plains.
I love it. I think that, I had a sneaking suspicion that might be the case. But, the Great Lakes and the Great Plains are two great aspects of our identity in the Midwest. And this is exciting. I got to check out this book. I got to see this in action one of these days. Maybe I'll follow you around one day, Catherine, as you go to these different fairs and check out how you judge and really enjoy, the sort of, history being preserved, one recipe at a time. Thank you.
And you know what? We can make it a date for next year because I think Ohio will probably be back in action.
Okay, count me in. I am so ready. I think that would be a blast. And thank you for being part of the show. You've been listening to Eat Your Heartland Out. This episode was produced by me, Capri Cafaro. Our audio engineers are Liam Warner and Armin Spengen. Theme music by Jason Shaw. You can learn more about the show by visiting heritageradionetwork.org/Eat Your Heartland Out. Eat Your Heartland Out is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.